This is Pickle Rick, Alien Rick, and the smartest Rick in the multiverse. But these are only 3 of the thousands of Ricks in the show. And I'm going to explain every single one, starting with this scene, where you can see Black Rick in the background, and while the show has only included this Rick 3 times, the writers actually revealed that he was added to Rick and Morty to mess with viewers, with the creator saying, "The idea that there's a Rick who's black for no obvious reason was always funny to us in the writer's room." But race isn't the only thing Rick and Morty changed, because there's a Rick who's a female. See, back in season 1, while Rick and Morty were trying to escape the Council of Ricks, they stumbled into a world where humans are used as chairs. And if you look closely during the scene, you can see this Rick who looks identical to normal Rick, except for the fact that she's a female. Now, she was only on screen for a couple seconds, so most people never noticed her, but at least she made it into the show, because this next Rick has only been shown in the comics. I'm talking about Old God Rick, the most powerful Rick in existence. This guy can create and destroy entire dimensions just by thinking about it, making him so powerful that the Council of Evil Ricks worship him. But right before he was going to destroy the main character's universe in comic book issue 45, Summer and Morty arrived in the nick of time and dropped a nuclear bomb, destroying the most dangerous Rick forever. And listen, while there's definitely a Rick for the craziest thing you can think of, there's also a Rick that's a little too normal. Fat Rick. This version was a mafia boss who made an alliance with main character Rick to defend each other's planets, though the show did brutally roast him with a fat joke, which was kinda messed up. But if we're talking messed up, we gotta talk about Rick's weirdest form, giant butt-eating Rick. In issue 33 of the comics, Rick and Morty accidentally traveled to a dimension where giants eat stuff through their butt. Now, this sounds kinda painful, but before Rick and Morty could get hands-on experience, the giants started fighting each other for the right to eat the little humans, giving the main characters just enough time to escape. Dang. Giant butt-eating Rick is weird, but Alien Rick is out of this world. And if you go back to the scene where Black Rick was introduced, you can see Alien Rick hanging out with him. Now, the thing that makes him stand out the most is the fact that he's got 4 arms. But this wasn't always the case, because if you look at Alien Rick in the Rick and Morty video game, he actually only has 2 arms, which the animators quickly fixed after realizing their mistake. But that's not the only form hidden in the Rick and Morty video game, because this is John Rick. They took the deadly assassin John Wick and turned him into the even more legendary John Rick. And while he only exists in the video game, the show's creator revealed in an interview that he considered John Rick as an official part of the Rick and Morty universe. Now, another Rick that needs more screen time is Bald Rick, because after President Morty was elected, he had a bunch of Ricks executed, including our bald buddy who could be seen floating in space in this scene. Man, Bald Rick only lasted a couple seconds. Dude's making Ricks look bad. But this next Rick is the reason the entire show happened in the first place. See, of the thousands of Ricks out there, Rick Prime was the first to invent the portal gun, leaving his family behind in order to explore the multiverse and teach other Ricks how to create portal guns too. He eventually traveled to main character Rick's Earth and tried to convince Rick to explore the universe with him. But OG Rick refused to leave his family and declined Rick Prime's offer. This pissed off Rick Prime, so out of vengeance, he planted a bomb in Rick's garage, killing Diane and Beth as our Rick watched with horror on his face. That day, something broke in Rick as he dedicated his life to exterminating every single Rick until he found Rick Prime. And over the course of this Rick massacre, all the other Ricks would come to give our broken-hearted Rick the title of the Rickest Rick, the truly most a-hole Rick in existence. But someone who's the opposite of an a-hole is Teacher Rick. Introduced in season 3, episode 7, Teacher Rick's whole purpose is to teach Mortys how to be the best sidekicks possible while not annoying their Ricks too much. Sadly, when evil Morty took over, Teacher Rick was fired and we don't really know what happened to him after that. Now this is Toxic Rick, and he's the most negative Rick, made of the universe's most toxic materials. And unlike the other Ricks in the show, this Rick was created when our main Rick went to a spa and all the toxicity leaked out of him. But despite all the negative traits, there's something intriguing about Toxic Rick, because back in the day, he was strangely protective of his toxic Morty and was willing to do anything for him. In the end, this was Toxic Rick's downfall as he died protecting Toxic Morty. See, original Rick shot Toxic Morty with a slow kill dart, and the only way to save him was if Toxic Rick merged with OG Rick. Toxic Rick agreed, and as the 2 versions of Rick became one, the toxic traits that had once consumed him were absorbed and neutralized. Listen, Toxic Rick is nothing compared to this next Rick, because there's a literal cat Rick. Matter of fact, there's an entire dimension where humans are cat people. And in issue 22 of the comics, you can find panels showing Cat Rick, Cat Beth, and even Cat Morty. And while Cat Rick hasn't made it in the show yet, the comics revealed that he has a very important role to play in one of the later seasons. Now, Cat Rick isn't the only animal Rick out there, because there's a literal Nazi shrimp Rick. I know, right? A Rick that's a shrimp and a Nazi all in one. At first, Shrimp Rick appeared to be kind and helpful to Rick. However, their relationship quickly turned bad when Shrimp Rick realized that Rick wasn't a fascist like himself. This sent Shrimp Rick into a murderous rage, chasing OG Rick down and then ending him. Now, OG Rick was of course revived, but he didn't come back as a human. He came back as Wasp Rick, making him the second ever Wasp Rick in the multiverse. Thankfully, the original Wasp Rick wasn't a fascist and invited OG Rick to dinner with his family. This might sound odd, but Wasp Rick is one of the few Ricks in the multiverse to have a healthy relationship with his family. And when OG Rick joined them for dinner, we saw them eating a caterpillar version of Morty's teacher. Now that's just sus. But believe it or not, there's a sussier Rick out there. I'm talking about Bootleg Portal Rick. Now this guy is as weird as they get. I mean, just look at this dude. He has dirty long hair, constantly drools, and only has 3 teeth in his mouth. Don't get me wrong, main character Rick already has a couple of these traits, but after doing more research, I found out why Bootleg Portal Rick is the sussiest Rick of them all. See, Bootleg Rick was an expert at creating cheap, off-brand portal gun fluid. But there was one massive problem. It was against the intergalactic laws. And in one scene from episode The Ricklantis Mix-Up, a couple of Mortys warned him that one day he'd be arrested if he kept on making this cheap portal fluid. But Bootleg Rick responded with a crude remark, saying that he'd even eat someone's eggplant to make a couple bucks. Before anyone could take him up on his offer, their conversation was interrupted when cop Rick and Morty bust into the room. Bootleg Rick tried to escape, but due to his faulty portal gun fluid, he instantly died upon touching the portal. Now coming in at number 5 is someone who's the total opposite of sus, and it's Farmer Rick. Along with his trusty robot dog, Farmer Rick operates as a farmer on the Citadel growing mega fruits. Unlike the majority of his counterparts, this Rick is known for his honesty, work ethic, and living a more peaceful life. But he only chose this life after years of chaotic adventures and near-death experiences. And one day, enough was enough, and he decided to spend his days tending to crops and sharing his farming knowledge with others. This version of Rick stands out from the rest because he values the simple things in life and the joy that comes from hard work. His peaceful approach to life is a refreshing contrast to the typical selfish genius persona of other Ricks, making him a unique and lovable character. But someone who's hated by everybody is Doofus Rick, and he's hated by literally every single Rick because he's the dumbest version of Rick out there. But while the other Ricks make fun of him, Doofus Rick is actually very compassionate, something that sets him apart from other Ricks. During the investigation at the Smith house, he approached Jerry with an open heart, expressing genuine interest in his life and abilities. Their friendship quickly blossomed because it was based on compassion, since both had been ostracized and ridiculed by other Ricks. And contrary to what the creator thought, fans began liking their friendship because it was such a fresh change from the usual crap-talking Rick. Now, if you thought Doofus Rick was different, then this next one will shock you because this Rick takes orders from a Morty. I'm talking about Cop Rick, and this guy follows rules by the book. He's so careful that he puts his seatbelt on even when Cop Morty doesn't. Usually Ricks are carefree and make all the decisions, but Cop Rick lets his Morty take charge. But things took a strange change after Cop Morty revealed his true colors. See, Cop Morty was actually being paid off by a gang leader Morty to let him do whatever he wanted without getting in trouble. After Cop Rick saw this, he couldn't let this corruption go on any longer and shot his own Morty for the greater good. But Rick created a device for the greater good, and it completely backfired. This invention was RickBot, and he was specifically made to replace Rick and distract the family while main Rick could focus on his projects. What makes RickBot unique, however, is that he was programmed to be 22% nicer than main Rick. 22% doesn't seem like a whole lot, but it was enough to actually make Morty cry tears of joy. However, something terrible happened after the Smith family found out that RickBot was just an AI distracting them. After the truth came out that Rick was a robot, the whole family drew their weapons and destroyed RickBot. They even beheaded him and used his head as their Christmas tree topper. But this wasn't the end of RickBot, as the family needed him in their most desperate hour. see, the government almost exploded the whole world and put the blame on Morty. So Rickbot and Morty confronted the president, but it turned into a dirty fight. And when Morty got the upper hand, he almost killed the president. But Rickbot jumped in front of the president and absorbed the lightsaber bolts to save Morty from killing someone. Now, how can we have a list of crazy Ricks and not include Pickle Rick? I mean, this version of Rick is on a whole nother level. Despite being a pickle, he is smart, aggressive, and a force to be reckoned with. By experimenting on himself and turning into a fruit, Rick showed his ingenuity and resourcefulness as a scientist. He also created a range of gadgets and weapons to help him navigate the world as a pickle, including a suit of rat parts and a makeshift exoskeleton made of toothpicks. Rick's intelligence and quick thinking allow him to outsmart and overpower his enemies. From killing rats with screws to demolishing heavily armed government agents, Rick does it all while being a frickin' pickle. His combat skills are also on full display during his fight scenes, where he uses his small size and agility to his advantage. Despite how funny he looks, Pickle Rick is no joke and a testament to Rick's genius and resourcefulness as a scientist. This is only a couple of the millions of Ricks in the multiverse. If this video hits 10,000 likes, I'll cover the rest of the alternate versions of Rick Sanchez.